Hi, it's Richard here from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting with a walkthrough of the fantastic article that Davin has left for us on the OPA blog. Um, the idea is to hook up a OAA decision service to a large language model and use it as a plugin to respond to requests about a particular issue. And in this case, it's responding to the idea of whether someone needs to file a tax return or not. So the first part of the package, which is given by Davin in the article, and I'll leave links to the article at the bottom of my video description, is you can go and get the first decision service. So the first decision service is the one which will tell us whether a person needs to file a tax return or not. And as such, it's a very straightforward decision service with a number of inputs, some of which are mandatory, and one Boolean output. So I'm going to load that into the decision service interface. Do I need to file? So here's our decision service ready to import. I'm going to change the name of it, which if you choose to do that, you're going to have to go and edit some stuff in some of the other files that were provided by Davin. So I would recommend that you don't change the name. As you can see, there's one output, which is a Boolean to tell you whether someone needs to file a tax return or not. Let's import it and just make sure that everything's okay on this side. Yeah, so it's a very simple decision service. Certain of the fields are not required, like this one is not required, and you can see above, filing status is required. So filing status might be your status. Are you single? Are you married? Are you part of a household? And so on. As you can see, there are a couple of examples. They're single, married filing jointly, married filing separately, and so on. And it comes down to this, is do you need to file a tax return? Let's go ahead and deploy that decision service, because obviously that's part of what we need to do. So we'll deploy it in a suitable workspace for the demo. And we'll activate it as well. All good. So what else do we need to do? Well, but since we're going to call our decision service through some files that Davin has provided with us, we need to make sure, first of all, that the thing is deployed properly, which it is. And I guess, we can use this to take a moment to test whether we understand how it works. We can see that there are a couple of items here, and the tax return is either going to return a true or false or a null value. The null value is going to be important because if it returns null, it basically means we can't render a decision. And if we can't render a decision, it typically means, therefore, that our little engine is going to ask for more information. Now, for this to work properly, we need a OpenAI compliant definition of our decision service, which also is provided by Davin. And we also need to make sure that since we're going to call this decision service, we have all the necessary permissions set up. So if you haven't already done so, now's the time to go and find yourself an API client and make sure that you have the name of the API client, the client's secret, and that they have the necessary permissions to hit the workspace that your decision service is stored in. Also need to give Node.js permission to hit the assessment API through the access settings in your hub. Now it comes down to the next stage will involve modifying some of the files that Davin was kind enough to give us. Specifically, you'll need to change the address of the hub. You'll need to change the API username, the API password in the decision.js file to begin with. You will, of course, also need an OpenAI API key. So if you have got an OpenAPI account, you can generate a new API key. And you will also need to make sure that your account has some credit on it. It might be as little as $10, but you need to have some money in that account. Otherwise, you won't be able to call this API key. When you've copied and pasted the API key into the necessary file, you can go ahead and start up the HTTP server and access the HTML file, which is the interface that's also provided in this fantastic demo. So when it pops up, I'll just go, and there we go. You'll think that it's an empty page, but in fact it's not, because there is a text item at the text box at the bottom of the page. When you start entering text, you'll see that the agent responds, and in this case, because I asked a question that was completely obvious, because it gave all of the mandatory items, it gave the filing status and the gross income, the tool was able to respond immediately in our little chat here to say, well, yeah, you need to file. So that was an easy one. The second one that they suggest is, well, go ahead and make a modification to that. Say, well, actually, it wasn't 60,000, it was 6,000, as you can see me typing at the bottom. So now we should expect it to come back and be a little smarter. No answer is possible with 6,000 in the current state of play. So it's going to come back and say, well, what about all these non-obligatory, these non-mandatory elements? And I could say, well, none of those apply. And it'll go and say, okay, now you've told me all these are false, therefore you don't need to make a tax return. This is truly fantastic. So now the engine will come back and tell me, there you go, based on the updated information. So we'll keep pushing along, and now we'll say, well, what about if they were married and they were filing jointly? Does that make a difference? Again, we should see the decision service. There we go. Married filing jointly as our status with a gross income of 6,000. Oh, I've got so many things going on. I need to scroll down. Again, a null is returned. So, well, we now need to know the spouse's gross income. So, okay, it's worked out that I need the spouse's gross income. I'll add that in. I've got so many things going on. I need to scroll down now, and it'll say. And we still return null, so we need to ask you a few more pieces of information. What about recapture tax? So let's say they need recapture tax. Now we should reach a point where we get an answer from our tool. There we go, return true this time. And yes, someone filing jointly as a married person with that income, now joint income, now needs to file for 2022. Now, that sums it up for part one. I'll see you in part two to discover the second decision service that was in there.